Hey everyone, it's Sevi. Hu Tao's third banner run is up for the second half of 3.4, and with a reputation that precedes her, some of you are probably wondering if she's worth pulling for your account. In this video, I'll discuss what I think are the main things to consider about Hu Tao to help you decide if it's time to bury your primos in her banner. Note as well that I am preparing my updated full Hu Tao guide, which will be coming very soon, and so I want to keep this video concise to just tackle the most essential points and leave the more detailed info about her kit, builds, teams, and such to my full guide. With that, let's discuss if the 77th director of the Wangsheng Funeral Parlor is worth pulling for you. Hu Tao's role is an on-field pyro DPS that excels in single-target combat and dealing high reaction damage. If you're looking for someone to fill in that role, then Hu Tao will likely be on your radar. Her fame for being one of the best DPSs is certainly well-deserved, and a well-invested Hu Tao played properly can trivialize bosses. But that potential requires somewhat a bit more effort from the player to unlock that you'll want to be aware of. The first point of consideration is that there is a learning curve for her optimal playstyle, which essentially involves executing charged attacks consistently, doing animation cancels, and managing your stamina as efficiently as possible. In concept, it's pretty simple, but it asks for good enough hand-eye coordination and awareness to be able to sustain and repeat this combo as consistently as you can. How hard it is really depends on your personal skill level. You might find it very doable, and so Hu Tao's playstyle can be easily manageable or even engaging. But if you don't have the prerequisite skills and would rather not bother trying to learn and master this particular playstyle, then I probably won't recommend you to pull for her. And while some might say that you technically don't need to learn these various charged attack and cancel combos, and that some content won't require it anyway, you will lose out a lot of damage potential if you don't apply it when needed. Not to mention you're missing out on the gameplay that makes her uniquely strong. She also has an HP reduction mechanic where she consumes her HP to enable her skill, and if you get her to half HP or less, she gives herself a damage bonus buff via her A4 passive, more so with Staff of Homa's effect. It's an optional buff, but it introduces a bit of incentive for risking your HP for more damage, which may or may not be for you. I personally don't find it a big deal since I run her with shielding or sufficient healing, or you might not even need those and just be really good at dodging and iframing. But consider if her risk and reward mechanics are to your liking as well. So with those in mind, fun and convenience of gameplay are major considerations, and that's a subjective aspect that only you can determine. The easiest way to get an initial feel is to test her out in her trial run and practice doing charged attack and cancel combos. See if you're willing to learn it, how well you can execute it, if you're okay with the stamina drain, and just overall if her gameplay feels good. Now, if you think you're up for the job with her playstyle, then the next step to maximizing her is with her teams. As a pyro DPS, Hu Tao's best templates are pretty straightforward. Vaporize is her premier and popular team archetype. Unsurprisingly, the top teammate for that is Xingqiu, who has the incredible combined offensive and defensive synergy with her. Since Xingqiu's fast hydro application can keep up with Hu Tao's pyro even by himself, he's very essential in many of Hu Tao's teams. And if you do have Yelan, the double hydro combo with Xingqiu and Yelan is incredible and highly synergistic with Hu Tao to elevate her vape team. But note that while Yelan is similar to Xingqiu's role for off-field hydro application, without Yelan C2, she won't be able to keep up her hydro application as well as Xingqiu can, so it's not as recommended to make her the solo hydro applicator for Hu Tao. Then when you have your Vaporize core, you can slot in a Cryo to make it a Vaporize Melt team, or an Electro unit to turn it into a Vaporize Overload team. Having a second Pyro unit like Amber, Toma, or Shield Yanfei, who can apply Pyro for an Anemo VV user to swirl before Hu Tao takes the field, is also another option to further boost her damage. Double Geo with Albedo and Zhongli is another great pick with strong defense, albeit a lower damage ceiling compared to her other meta teams. Hu Tao and Xiangling can also pair up and form either the very strong Funerational team with double Hydro, or form a mono Pyro team. And the most recent addition to her team options because of Dendro is Burgeon Hu Tao. Yes, that's actually a thing. She already reduces her own HP, so why not help her more with that? Speaking of Dendro, I also want to mention the way that Dendro reframed the value of old units. If we consider Hu Tao from the pre-Dendro era, she was one of the best on-field DPSs. Vaporized teams were ranked highly, and Hu Tao set a pretty impressive standard for the single target damage ceiling of such teams. That's mostly why she got a reputation of being top tier, and technically speaking, the strong performance of her teams are just as good as ever if you invest in them. However, more and more teams are sprouting that are very good even at low to mid investment, like Hyperbloom and Quickbloom especially. We're getting more spoiled for choice, and the vaporized meta teams that were prominent before Dendro are now finding more and more competition. And so Hu Tao didn't really become worse because Dendro is out, and her best teams are still really strong. It's just that our selection of alternative amazing teams got expanded while being more accessible, easy to build, and oftentimes not needing the skill expression that a unit like Hu Tao wants. Next, let's consider the experience of building her. Thankfully, her artifacts are relatively efficient to farm. For her best full sets, it boils down to Crimson Witch, Shimenawa, and to a certain extent, Gilded Dreams. Crimson Witch is now strong boxable, which is a plus for efficiency. Shimenawa is also in a very resin-efficient domain, as you also get emblem pieces to put on some of Hu Tao's teammates. And if you prefer spending more time in the Gilded Deepwood domain for your other Dendro units, then even Gilded Dreams is viable for her in reaction teams. If you'd rather settle for good 2-piece sets, combos of Crimson Witch, Tenacity, or an EM set are all perfectly fine as well. And as an HP scaling character, she's also not competing for attack stats versus other DPSs, and instead is looking for crit, HP, and EM. That said, you really want to invest good artifacts on her to bring out her high damage potential, which may take some patience to acquire. As for weapons, she doesn't have as many optimal polearm options as someone like Xiangling would, but she has at least one weapon choice for each bracket. The White Tassel is her best free-to-play weapon, so I hope you still have a lot of unopened chests in Liyue, or you were able to save at least one copy. If you're going up a tier, her 4-star choices are the Dragon's Bane, which you can gacha and refine, the Lithic Spear if in Liyue focus teams, or the Battle Pass Deathmatch. Then for 5 stars, if you can afford it, the Staff of Homa is her best in slot, but you shouldn't feel pressured to get it as she can still be very good without it. Otherwise, if you happen to have a Staff of Scarlet Sands or even a Primordial Jadewing Spear, those are still very good options for her. Now, if you already had Hu Tao or have the Primos to spare and are wondering if you'd rather pull her C1 or Staff of Homa in the upcoming banners, there are good arguments and benefits for either choice. Her C1 is a huge quality of life improvement for her playstyle to reduce her overall stamina consumption and even survivability, since you can now do dash cancels more often. This can also lead to a significant overall DPS increase of about 20% if you take advantage of it well. So if you really are dedicated to Hu Tao and see yourself really sticking with her for a very long time, and you want her to feel nicer to play, guaranteeing a constellation is more likely than a 5-star weapon. If you've already played Hu Tao for a long enough time, then that should be enough for you to realize just how much value you would personally get out of C1. But if this is also the first time you'll play Hu Tao, and you're perhaps a free-to-play or low spender, my advice is to first get a feel for her at C0 and not pull C1 too soon if you're just thinking about it. Instead, take the time to gauge how she feels without C1's effect. She might already feel quite manageable at C0, which might make you realize that you can just save your Primos for another character or weapon. And if you really feel the potential being locked at C1, then at least you can make a more well-informed decision to pull for it and appreciate its value even more. As for pulling Staff of Homa, consider that it is transferable as a very good general DPS weapon. If you have other polearm characters that want to share Homa, it might be the better addition to your account, albeit at a higher risk with the weapon banner. Just know that it isn't a requirement for Hu Tao to be strong and becomes less attractive if you already have good 4-star or 5-star alternative weapon choices for her. Still, since it's currently running with Aqua Simulacra, also a good general DPS bow that I personally wouldn't mind losing to, this might be a very good opportunity to try getting it. But if you're willing to put in the primos, whether now or over time, to get not just a C0 Hu Tao, but also her constellations and her signature weapon and min-max her build, then Hu Tao is actually a character that scales very well with vertical investment. So if you want to be set for a pyro DPS that you can grow and stick with for the long term, Hu Tao is a very good choice. So to sum it all up, she's an incredible unit that ranks up there in her particular role. Of course, don't forget there are other pyro DPSs that are still very good and easier to use. More importantly, you ought to be willing to have a higher level of skill expression than usual and find fun in doing so to really appreciate and maximize Hu Tao. If you'd rather say no thank you to that, then you can easily skip her. You might realize too late that you don't like her particular playstyle or would prefer a more frictionless experience others can offer. You don't want to have a very strong yet often benched character. So, pull her because she's a unit you personally really like, both in terms of gameplay and character. With enough skill and investment, she will send your enemies to the afterlife faster than you can imagine. Again, I'll be releasing a more comprehensive Hu Tao guide next, so if you want to learn more details to help with building and playing her, don't forget to check it out when it's up. I'll also link in the description my thoughts on Yelan's pull value if you're considering her as well. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!